Everybody. Thanks for joining us here today at Edmentum, Illinois YouTube channel. We're here, Kevin and I are back again with another educator highlight, another educator showcase. Today, we're thrilled to be joined by Dr. Brad Hubbard. Brad is currently the Assistant Superintendent for Teaching and Learning in Antioch, District 117. However, just found out here a couple minutes ago that today's actually his last official day in District 117, and he's starting his transition next year, or I should say officially tomorrow. He will be the Superintendent of Schools in Antioch District 34, which is a K-8 district. So we're very much happy and honored to have Brad here with us. Brad, good morning. How are you today?
I'm well. Good morning. I really appreciate the time. It's good to see both of you.
Thanks, Brad. Yeah, really what we want to do here today is of course talk with you a little bit about remote learning, of course, because that's obviously front of mind for so many folks here. So we're going to certainly talk with you a little bit about that. But then we're also very interested just to hear about the transition for you moving from District 117, a high school district, to a pre-K-8 district. So we're thrilled to talk to you about that. So maybe what we'll do here, Brad, is start out by, if you could just tell us a little bit the story of remote learning, specific to District 117. So we'll start out talking about the high school perspective, and then we'll move over to the elementary, middle school perspective. So, kind of what were some of the initial reactions that you heard from stakeholders in District 117 when the shutdown took place and then this transition to remote learning?
Yeah, for sure. I think, in 117, it's been a journey. We've had conversations about standing up an e-learning plan for quite some time. We've gone round and round. We didn't have one drafted and approved. We had one that we had been working on, communicating, trying to wrestle with a little bit. And then when the shutdown happened, to a person, and this goes for staff members, to students, to parents, to board members, the message was, how can we help? We came back from a meeting, my superintendent and myself came back from a meeting where we had made the official decision that we were going to close. It was a Friday. We got back and we returned to a conference room filled with people who were just eager to get to work, to build a plan, to communicate. Our association came directly to the district office that morning, met with us, and absolutely said, we're ready for this. We are ready for this. Our teachers are, our students are, we believe our community is. And whether or not we really were, right, the message was, we're ready and we're going to do it. And we're all in this thing together. And it was really, I mean, there was a moment there where it was almost inspirational, right? Like we came into a meeting and where you thought there might be panic and some chaos and some frustration or maybe even disappointment, it really was, let's get to work right now. And within hours, we had documents and communications and things built. And it was a remarkable amount of work that was done in such a short amount of time. And then continued to work with teachers virtually and remotely, and staff in general. And our student services team came up with ideas for how that they could support kids. Our ESPs came up with ideas. Our paraprofessionals were adamant about making sure that they had access to the various platforms and could communicate with kids while they were remotely learning. And it really was. It was just it came together so fast. And in education, that isn't always the case. There's always a lot of talk and a lot of committees and a lot of circling and planning and learning and reading. We just did. And I couldn't be more proud of the team in 117 and just the support that we've gotten from home, from the board, from the staff, and most importantly, from our kids.
So then that was how everything, kicked off, right? And Kevin and I were talking about this yesterday. I mean, it's been quite a while since all that happened, right? So there was that initial push, right? I love that idea of we just did, right? We just did it, right? We didn't wait for the committees or anything like that. We just did it. And that collective question of how can we help? How powerful is that? And so now, I mean, now we fast forward to today, right? 6-7 weeks now. So how have things maybe evolved, since that first day? How have things changed from a remote learning perspective?
Yeah, I think the biggest change is in the amount of grace and empathy that are baked into the processes that we've stood up. I think the initial push was to make sure that we had content and things for students to engage in and do. And that was the right move at the time to build that. I think what we've learned and what we've tried to wrap our heads around and what we've tried to communicate is it's really hard for us in these offices and in these positions and even, you know, remotely at home as a teacher to understand the experiences and the, you know, how this all is impacting students on an individual basis at home. You know, for some of our students, home is sometimes the last place they want to be, right? And school is the first place that they want to be. And to come to the realization that that's the current reality for some of our students, I've seen this shift, and we've seen this shift in the conversation that's become more empathetic. And we've talked about this idea of grace over grades. And one of our principals, both of our principals have worked with their staff to focus on the learning versus the earning. You know, we're trying to come up with these taglines and mottos to repeat over and over again, just as a friendly reminder to our staff that the focus really needs to be on the connections with kids and still focus on the relationships. And then finding authentic and genuine ways for students to make connections to the content, as opposed to just, you know, read and complete an assignment, you know, authentic ways to engage and create. So we've seen some of the shift, and it's really fun to see, and it's neat to hear the teachers collaborating with one another on unique ways that they found to reach out to kids, and they've got some kids participating now that weren't participating when they were in class, because this is resonating with them, right? And then for other kids it's different, and so we're reaching out to those kids too to find out, you know, why can't we get them to engage when they were so engaged when they were on site. So the evolution has been really interesting to see, but I'm really proud of the evolution, because we've started to, not that it wasn't the focus before, but it's become so much more intentional in the relationship and the empathy.
Grace over grades, learning over earning. Those are the two that I wrote down here. Those are great taglines. I love them. So powerful. Brad, and sort of perfect segue. I mean, you know, you just sort of paved the way for my next question. I mean, I know that, I mean, working with teachers on their craft is very important to you. It's a passion of yours, right? The idea of really bringing instruction to the next level. So maybe what are some of those unique things, some of those instructional practices that you've seen some of the high school teachers implement here during the shutdown?
The one thing they've realized the power of connection. And so, you know, initially we were posting assignments and responding to emails and stuff. I think we're seeing more and more teachers jump on Google Hangouts or calls with their kids through Zoom, and trying to make sure that they're given an opportunity to have some FaceTime, both with their classes as a whole, but then also working with individual students one-on-one. I think some of those instructional practices where we've tried to personalize the virtual learning, you know, it's daunting enough to try to put together just a day's worth of work for your class as a whole, but we've started to see the personalization of not only maybe some assignments and some flexibility and how students demonstrate their learning, but they've also started to personalize the way that they're connecting and reaching out to individual students. For some students, all they need is the classroom, Google Classroom, post my assignment, I'll get it done, submit it, and I'll see you tomorrow. Other kids need some time, some FaceTime, some additional support. And I think our teachers have become just, not that we didn't focus on it and had those conversations about differentiation and personalized learning in the classroom, but it's just this whole situation has just been a catalyst for change, and has forced us to think differently and do differently without all the thought and the reservation and the fear that sometimes comes with some of that stuff. And so it's been really fun to see how the teachers have really tried to personalize their practices and to try things that otherwise they hadn't done before.
Were there some teachers that were surprised maybe a little bit, just in you know, you mentioned that, you know, some kids who really did well in the brick and mortar setting, right, you know, maybe weren't as engaged now, and then maybe you had some kids who historically hadn't been as engaged and now are. You know, what was some of the reaction of the teachers when they started, you know, saw that happening?
Yeah, I think it just causes us to pause and think.
Yeah.
And you know, what are the carrots and sticks that we utilize in the classroom, and how and why are we getting kids to engage? Is it, you know, we think it's this genuine, authentic engagement sometimes, and other times the reality is kids are chasing points and chasing grades. And then, with this, do no harm and grades aren't as impactful as they were. I think we've had to shift from, the grades and the points aren't what kids are chasing. It's the learning. And so we need to make sure that learning is connecting to something that they're interested in, passionate about, trying to figure out what those hooks are to get them to engage at different levels. That's really been the challenge. And I think at first it was kind of this confusion. This student always turns their assignment in, and I haven't heard from him in 3 days.
Mm-hmm.
And then this other student, I can't get to talk in class, but has done everything that I've posted. And just trying to wrap your head around the why behind that, and then operationalize it. So once they get that information and figure out that why, how do you operationalize it, make it matter?
Love that. Brad, just one last question about the high school side of things, and then we'll talk a little bit about your official new role, which is starting tomorrow. But seeing as it's your last official day in District 117 here on April 30, how are you and the team sort of thinking about next year, or how are the high school teachers and that team planning for next school year?
I think just this message of, ultimate flexibility, trying really, really hard not to make any promises to anybody because there's so much uncertainty and so many unknowns. But with that said, we've stood up a committee that has been meeting regularly, this transition or return to on-site learning committee, where we're trying to wrestle with the logistics behind bringing people back, the instructional considerations from a curriculum standpoint of what standards we missed here and when can we pick them up. We've started these conversations about, first and foremost, when we welcome our students back into our buildings, how do we check in and see how they're doing? Because really, this is impacting students in ways that I don't know that we fully understand yet, and on many different levels. And just because we open our schools back up doesn't mean that things return to normal. And so I think that we're trying to be proactive in thinking about how can we check in on the social emotional wellness and health of our students and our staff. That's another component that we're really hyper vigilant about. This has been a huge transition and learning curve and curveball to our staff as well. And so, as we talk about school year 2021, we don't know what it looks like yet. So we're trying to plan for as many possibilities as possible, but also not, focus on one just to have the rug ripped out from underneath us again. We want to make sure that we're considering all the unknowns and the possibilities and just increasing our capacity to be able to respond. And that's really what this has been all about is, we've increased exponentially the capacity of our staff and our system and our parents to manage change at breakneck speed.
Ultimate flexibility. I love that. Kevin, I'll kick it over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. Brad, big change, right? High school to elementary, assistant to superintendent, a big change in any environment. Let's take us out of our current situation. Let's say everything was normal. What are your priorities in a change, in a transition, moving into this role? What are the things that really are at top of mind for you coming into this leadership role and working with new buildings, new staff? Just walk me through kind of that quick thought or a quick a list of things that you say, these are the things that I think about moving into this role.
Yeah, I love that. I'm a relational leader. I absolutely believe in the power and the value in genuine and authentic relationships. And so first and foremost, regardless of what the transition is, it's really, really important for me to start to forge, positive, genuine relationships. And I think the way that you do that are a couple of different things. First is you have to listen. You have to provide space for people to share their stories, their points of pain, their points of pride. You have to be able to listen and genuinely hear kind of the experiences of people in addition to some of their expectations. It's really important as a leader in any position to understand what people are expecting of themselves, what they expect of the system, of the organization, and certainly of the leader. I think it's important to establish some really clear communication strategies so that people know there's some transparency to the decision-making process, to the learning process, that seeking to understand people's current reality, I think, comes through providing these communication platforms for people. And then the other piece is trying to build trust. I think that is really important. The trust allows the relationships to really become genuine and things that we can leverage in systems when we have positive relationships with one another, is if there's a trusting relationship. And so it's really important that when you're on those listening tours, that when you hear things that people, their stories feel like they're being valued and heard, they're seen, they're loved, but that they're also the source of some sort of action and movement and to some decision making. And so those are the things that, as I make the transition, I'm really hyper focused on. I'm in a great situation. I've been in District 117 for 7 years. It is the high school district that this feeder district in 34 feeds all of its kids into. So I feel like I know the community. I feel like I know a lot of what the school district is and has been about, but I think it's disingenuous to come in thinking that I know. And so it's really important that I go back all the way to square one and start building those relationships, because truthfully, these are new families, these are new kids, this is new curriculum, these are new teachers. And it's important for me to not, just chalk it up to I'm comfortable in the community. I know what we're going to do, and I just hit the ground running. That I really do go back to square one and focus on those fundamental things: that relationships, the communication, and the trust.
So in a normal environment, people love to meet with the superintendent. You have those listening tours, you have coffees, you have, different ways to connect both to community, staff, students. How do you do it now?
It's a challenge. Like I said, I'm a relational leader. It's about FaceTime with people. It's about contact, and there's nothing that your eyes and your body language really, when you're in person with somebody. I think that's how you build these genuine listening opportunities and let people know that you're truly seeking to understand. This is just different, but I can't allow myself to not keep the same priorities, but rather to shift the way in which I'm trying to connect. And so up until 2 weeks ago, I've never done a YouTube video, but I went out on my deck on a Saturday or Friday morning and recorded myself. I felt like I needed to send a message. I wanted to connect with people. And so I recorded something and posted. I've done a handful of those. There was a Sunday night that I was just really wrestling with wrapping my head around, how do I describe the current reality and try to provide a sense of hope, which I feel like you can do when you're with people and you're shoulder to shoulder with them or elbow to elbow, rolling up your sleeves and working with them. So I took a stab at writing a poem, and I posted it as a blog post, and I emailed it out to the entire staff in 117, the entire staff in District 34. I'm just trying to find different ways to make connections. And certainly via these Zoom and Google Meets and things, there's ways to individually and as a group connect with people. But I've also tried my hand at some different things that I just haven't done before. And I think some of them are resonating, and I've gotten some really positive feedback. And so just trying to continue to beat on that path and make sure that I understand that I need to change too. We expected everybody else to make these wholesale changes in what they were doing and how they were conducting business and trying to provide learning opportunities, and our families for how they were helping teach their kids. Certainly I can do my share of that as well. So I think those two things, the YouTube, the poem, I've tried to come up with a mantra. I wore my "You'll Never Walk Alone" sweatshirt on purpose today, because I knew that I was going to be on here. I've tried to come up with this mantra, this saying, so long as you're part of our family, whether you're remote or you're here in person, you're not alone. And so we've stood up these family check-ins. We have a staff check-in that goes out every Tuesday, a family check-in that goes out every Wednesday here in District 34, giving anybody an opportunity to raise their hand and say, I need help. Tap me in for a project. I need something to do. Give me a call. I need somebody to talk to. My Wi-Fi's been down for a week. Can we get a hotspot? We've tried to do those things as well to make sure that we're connecting with people.
So obviously connections, relationships, those are the things that you're finding other ways to build. Based on what you've done so far, and maybe what you've heard from others or other colleagues. What recommendations would you give on, the short time that we've had? What are a couple of things you've learned that you could say, I would do it again, or I wouldn't do it again?
Yeah, I think a couple of things that we're trying to be intentional about. I think, one thing that I've learned over the years and I've become more and more comfortable with recently is, leading with this confident vulnerability. And I think just being vulnerable, grabbing my phone and hitting record and just recording something that isn't scripted, standing on my deck, trying to be vulnerable and talk from the heart. I think that resonates with people. And so I would encourage people to it's okay to not know the answer. It's okay to not know what to say, but to throw something out there and demonstrate some vulnerability and be confident in that, being able to write something that you haven't written before and post it out there for anybody and everybody to read and critique. I think trying to demonstrate that and lead by example through some of that is important. It's important to share, to talk about how I'm feeling and let people know that they're not in this alone. I trying to find multiple mechanisms to reach out, but then also give people multiple mechanisms to then communicate back. And so, when you send out an email, they always have the opportunity to hit a reply. When you're sending out these check-in forms on a weekly basis, they've got an opportunity. They're trying to find ways to reach out and provide multiple mechanisms for people to raise their hand and ask for help. And then the other thing, and it's harder to do when you go to the store and everybody's wearing a mask, but there's something to be said for smiling at people. And I think, even when you're on these calls and stuff like that, trying to, as much as you can, to try to make eye contact and to try to smile and try to, just be genuine in that interaction, that human connection. I think those are the things that I'm trying to model. And I know that I'm learning so many things from so many other people that are doing the same.
So confident vulnerability. I think that's a great message to wrap up our time today. So, Brad, we really thank you. We wish you great luck in the transition, and we know that your kids, parents, and staff are well. They're in great hands, and we look forward to learning from you as we move forward. So, thanks so much.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate the opportunity to chat.
Thanks, Brad.
Be
Best
well
of
and
luck
stay
to you,
healthy.
sir. Yep.
Thank you.
You stay well too. Thank you.